What if the very thing you've been fighting for your entire life, dignity, stability, love, suddenly slipped through your fingers just when it seemed closest within reach? Emma Collins thought she had finally broken free from the weight of poverty and judgment, only to find herself dragged back into the storm of rumors, betrayal, and choices that could either save her family or destroy everything she had worked for. Imagine standing in her shoes, the whispers at the office growing louder, the threat of losing the one chance to rebuild her life, and the terrifying realization that trusting the wrong person might leave her children with nothing. Her heart raced, her faith wavered, and yet in that darkest hour, an unexpected act of courage would change not just her fate, but the fate of everyone watching. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will shock you and prove that sometimes the greatest battles are fought, not in boardrooms, but in the human heart. It was the kind of winter morning that steals your breath and keeps it. Boston was a hush of fog and glass, the sidewalks shining with last night's rain. Emma Collins drew a slow breath and stepped into the lobby of Miller Enterprises, a cathedral of marble and steel where every footstep sounded like judgment. She had made it on time, pressed blouse, rehearsed answers, but in the frantic blur of zipping coats and waking children, she had left the folder. "Letter of appointment," the security guard asked, palm open, voice flat. Emma's smile stalled. "My paperwork." "No paperwork, no entry," he said. A few people looked up from their phones, glances sliding across her thrift store heels. Minutes bled out. Emma tried to explain she could show emails upstairs. HR knew her name. She would run, she would sprint. The guard shook his head. The clock behind him ticked louder than the lobby music. Something inside her began to cave. If she missed this interview, the week became rent, math, cafeteria, apples and plastic spoons. If she failed, what would the children eat? Across town, 7-year-old Sophie Collins stared at the forgotten folder on the motel table. The printed resume reference letters and the little note she'd tucked inside. "Mom, please don't give up." She grabbed the folder, pushed through the door, and spotted a black SUV idling under the winter light. "Are you Uber?" she asked, breath fogging. The driver met her eyes in the mirror. He wasn't Uber. Nathan Miller had paused there to collect his thoughts before the board briefing. The sight of a small girl hugging a folder unmoored him. "Where to?" he asked gently. "The big building downtown." "If my mom doesn't have this, we can't eat," Sophie blurted. Nathan nodded once and eased into traffic. Back at the lobby, Emma weighed humiliation against survival. She could call, beg, plead, bargain. How much dignity was dinner worth? Before she chose, the revolving doors spun and Sophie hurtled in cheeks, pink hair, damp folder thrust high like a torch. Mom relief buckled Emma's knees. She met her halfway, hands fumbling. The guard checked the clock, then the paperwork. 10 minutes past check-in. "You're late." "Please," Emma whispered. "The train my daughter rules are rules." Sophie's fingers tightened on Emma's coat. Around them, silence gathered, curiosity first, then judgment. "Excuse me," a calm voice said. The crowd shifted as the man from Sophie's ride stepped forward in a charcoal suit that didn't apologize for its price. Nathan's presence steadied the air. "She's with me." The guard's posture snapped upright. "Sir, I need authorization." "You have it," Nathan said, showing his badge. "Nathan Miller. This candidate is expected and will be interviewed. Her daughter will wait somewhere warm." The lobby recalibrated. Emma looked from Nathan to Sophie and back, piecing the morning into a story that felt impossible. Sophie slipped him the folded note. "I forgot to give this to Mom," she said. Nathan opened it. The handwriting was crooked, the words brave. "Please don't give up. We need you." Emma swallowed hard. "Why are you helping us?" The question came out thinner than she meant. Nathan met her gaze. "Because someone should have helped me when I needed it," he said quietly. Then to the guard, "Let's bring them upstairs." As they crossed the lobby, Emma noticed a leather wallet near a bench. Habit made her stoop to lift it. She handed it to a receptionist. "Someone will be missing this." Nathan watched the exchange, filing it away. The elevator doors slid open. Inside, their reflections waved in the brushed steel. Emma pale and stubborn, Sophie tiny, and lion-hearted Nathan, unreadable but present. The doors closed on the lobby's murmur. "What will HR think?" Emma asked, voice low. Walking in late with a child escorted by the CEO. They'll think it's cold outside, Nathan said. And that you still showed up. The elevator hummed upward. Emma's mind sprinted interview questions gaps in her resume, the wardrobe of second chances. She pictured the motel room, the dry cereal, the rationed heat, the way Sophie tucked her siblings in with promises she couldn't guarantee. The doors parted to a corridor of glass and light. Ms. Collins, a woman from HR, called, "Clipped and professional. You're late." Emma's throat tightened, but her spine lengthened. She placed the folder on the table with hands that no longer shook. Sophie squeezed her fingers, once a secret courage. Nathan stepped back, letting the room decide who it wanted to be today. Emma inhaled, felt the cold leave her lungs, and asked herself the only question that mattered: if accepting this unexpected kindness is the price of stepping into a different life. Am I truly brave enough to pay it and ready to live with what it will ask of me next? The elevator doors had closed with a metallic sigh, but Emma's pulse hadn't slowed. She held Sophie's hand tightly as though her little girl's warmth could anchor her against the storm raging inside her chest. Nathan Miller stood just a few feet away, silent, his tall frame reflected in the polished steel. He looked unshakable, a man used to commanding rooms full of people who never dared tell him no. Yet here he was standing between her and humiliation, insisting she be heard. The conference room loomed like a trial chamber. White walls, a table of polished oak, 3 chairs filled with strangers in dark suits. Emma swallowed and slid into her seat. Sophie, obedient and quiet, perched on a bench in the corner, the folder clutched like a shield across her lap. The questions began without ceremony. "Your resume shows gaps," one of them said, peering over reading glasses. "What explains those absences?" Emma's palms dampened. "Childcare responsibilities," she said. "And some jobs were temporary, waitressing, reception, whatever kept us afloat." Another leaned forward. "We expect stability, Ms. Collins. Why should we choose you over candidates with more polished credentials?" Each word chipped away at her fragile hope. She felt her throat constrict, her rehearsed answers evaporating. They didn't want to hear about late-night shifts at diners or dragging herself to work with the flu because missing hours meant no groceries. They wanted perfect, and she was anything but perfect. Her silence stretched too long. The room grew heavier, then a small voice pierced it. "Excuse me." Every head turned. Sophie had stood up, her skinny legs trembling, her little chin lifted. She walked forward and laid a crumpled paper on the table. A child's drawing, Emma in bright colors, arms stretched like a hero, 3 smaller figures huddled beneath her. At the top, written in shaky red crayon, "My mom is the bravest person I know." The interviewers blinked. One shifted uncomfortably, another coughed. Emma's breath caught. "Sophie, sweetheart, sit down now." Sophie whispered, "They don't know how hard you try." Nathan's eyes flicked to the drawing. Something flickered there. An old memory, perhaps, of a boy left alone too many times, a boy who knew what it meant to fight for scraps of dignity. He leaned forward, his voice steady but not cold. "Ms. Collins," he said, ignoring the panel, "tell me, what would your previous employer say about you?" Emma forced herself to answer, though her voice trembled. "That I'm dependable, that I learn fast, that I don't give up." Nathan closed the folder gently. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." The room went still. The interviewers glanced at one another, but none dared argue. The CEO had spoken. "You're hired," Nathan said. Emma's ears rang. She wasn't sure she'd heard right until Sophie clapped her hands, laughing through tears. Relief flooded Emma so fast it felt like weakness. She whispered, "Thank you," though the words felt too small. The days that followed tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. At the office, she arrived early, stayed late, kept her head down. Her notes were meticulous, her work careful, yet every whisper in the hallway pressed against her skin. Some praised her grit, others wondered aloud why the new CEO lingered near her desk. She ignored them, burying herself in spreadsheets, though her pulse always betrayed her when Nathan's gaze brushed across hers during meetings. Still, it was the evenings that haunted her. The children needed her, exhaustion stalked her, and doubt crept in like a thief. Was she here because of merit, or because Nathan Miller had chosen to see her? Then came the night of the storm. Boston's streets drowned under sheets of rain thunder rolling over the city. Emma sat at her desk, panic rising, as her babysitter texted last minute, "Can't make it tonight." She had no choice. She brought Sophie with her, promising it would be brief. But in the chaos of deadlines and flooded schedules, she looked up and Sophie was gone. Her blood ran cold. She sprinted through the corridors, shoes slick against the marble. In the lobby, through the sheets of rain against the glass doors, she saw her daughter, tiny drenched, clutching herself against the cold. And next to her, a figure holding his coat above her head, shielding her with his own body hair plastered to his forehead. Nathan. Emma burst outside, rain searing her skin like punishment. "Sophie," she cried, scooping her into her arms. Sophie was shivering but safe, wrapped now in Nathan's coat. "She's cold, but she'll be fine," Nathan said, voice rough from the storm. He looked at Emma, his eyes unreadable but heavy with something that unsettled her more than the rain. "Let me take you both home." Emma shook her head. "I can manage, you don't need to," he interrupted softly. "Not tonight." And for the first time, Emma didn't have the strength to argue. Later at Nathan's house, Sophie fell asleep on the couch in an oversized sweatshirt, warm at last. Emma sat at the kitchen table, hair still damp, hands curled around a mug of tea she couldn't bring herself to sip. Nathan leaned back in his chair, quiet, watching the fire's reflection in the glass. "I grew up in foster care," he said finally. "Never met my parents. I learned early that love disappears when money runs out. That's why I've trusted success more than people." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but the words tangled with gratitude and fear. She had built her life on silence, on swallowing pain. But this man, this powerful stranger, was offering pieces of himself she hadn't asked for. And as she sat in that warm kitchen, a fragile thought pulsed in her chest. Is it dangerous to accept his kindness? Or would refusing it mean turning away from the one chance at stability my children may ever have? The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. For days after that night, Emma walked through the office as if her footsteps might shatter the fragile balance she was trying to keep. She worked harder than ever, arriving before the lights switched on and staying until the cleaning staff shuffled in with their carts. Yet whispers followed her like shadows. Some said she was resilient. Others said she was lucky. But the cruelest voices suggested something darker, that her connection to Nathan was more than professional. At first, Emma tried to ignore it, but rumors have a way of hardening into weapons. One Friday morning, she was summoned to a closed-door meeting. Two HR representatives sat across from her with files open, their voices clipped and impersonal. "We've received reports of an inappropriate relationship between you and Mr. Miller," one of them said. Emma's stomach dropped. She shook her head, her words thin and shaking. "That's not true. I've done nothing wrong." But the looks on their faces made it clear their concern wasn't truth, but perception. By the time Nathan discovered what had happened, it was too late. Emma had resigned, quietly packing her desk with trembling hands, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and the weight of absence. When Nathan stormed into HR and saw the file, his anger was volcanic. He demanded the name behind the complaints and had the culprit escorted out of the building before lunch. But his victory was hollow. Emma was gone. He searched Boston with a desperation that stripped away his usual composure. Hours blurred into rain-slick streets and unanswered calls. Then on a busy Saturday afternoon, he spotted her daughter. Sophie stood near the entrance of a bookstore, her face pale with tears clutching the hem of her sweater as strangers passed without noticing. Nathan's chest seized. "Sophie," he called, dropping to his knees as she ran into his arms. She sobbed against him. "I lost Mommy. I couldn't find her." He held her tightly. "You're safe now. I'll find her." And he did. Inside the bookstore, Emma appeared, breathless, eyes wide with fear. She fell to her knees, pulling Sophie into her embrace. When she finally looked up, her gaze met Nathan's. "You once mistook me for a driver," he said softly, rain dripping from his coat. "But I never mistook you for anything less than extraordinary." Tears blurred her vision. For so long, she had carried the weight of survival, convinced no one would ever stand beside her. Yet here he was not offering pity, but partnership. Nathan glanced at Sophie, then back at Emma. "I've spent years building wealth thinking it would make me whole, but it didn't. Not until I met you. I don't need more success. I need a reason to come home." The words struck something deep inside her. For the first time in years, Emma let herself imagine a life not defined by fear, but by possibility. She reached for him, her hand trembling, and Nathan pulled both mother and daughter into his arms. Weeks later, the company's grand atrium was strung with lights for its anniversary gala. Laughter and music swirled through the air as Nathan stepped onto the stage. He told the story of a woman who had stepped into his car by mistake, carrying nothing but hope and determination. She thought she was rescuing herself, he said, eyes finding Emma in the crowd. But in truth, she rescued me. Then in front of hundreds of witnesses, he held out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught as Sophie ran to hand her the ring. Emma's whispered yes was drowned in thunderous applause, but Nathan heard it clearly enough. From that day, Emma was no longer just a survivor. She became the director of a new initiative to support single parents, a program Nathan launched in her honor. And together with Sophie skipping at their side, they began a new chapter, one built not on wealth or appearances, but on love, dignity, and second chances. But even as the lights dimmed that night, Emma's mind whispered one final question. After everything we've endured, can I truly trust this happiness to last? Or will life demand another sacrifice I'm not sure I can bear? What would you have done if you were in Emma's place? Would you have trusted Nathan's help or walked away to protect your pride? Do you believe true love can begin in the unlikeliest of places, even in a mistake, as small as stepping into the wrong car? What do you think about this story? Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched you, please comment number 3 below. If you felt neutral, comment number 2. And if you weren't satisfied, comment number 1. I'd love to know which country you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and tap the heart button to help us spread more stories like this. See you again in the next emotional journey.